And as you know, all week we've been talking about trade tensions and what they could mean for various industries. Tonight, we're taking a look at the tech sector and what could end up being the centerpiece of the China trade deal, but also possibly its biggest stumbling block, and that is intellectual property theft. We're joined tonight by Dan Ives, Managing Director of Equity Research at Wedbush Securities. Welcome, Dan. Nice to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks.
IP theft has been a problem for a long, long time, but it is kind of a laser-like focus in these particular trade talks. That's at least what we hear. Gauge what kind of success you think we'll have in terms of stemming it.
Well, I mean, look, as someone that's covered tech for 20 years, you're talking hundreds of billions is really lost in IP in terms of China. And from the Microsofts, the Adobes to others, this continues to be a hot button issue in the Valley. And that's why, I think sort of with the Trump administration, what they want is teeth in terms of these sort of tariffs and regulations, specifically on IP. And remember, this is all the drum roll for 5G over the next 12 to 18 months. And that is, from a threat perspective, going to be really the UFC battle between China as well as the U.S.
A huge sticking point in all of this, Dan, has been enforcement. How do you enforce any rules that may come out of this deal? And we assume that it's up to governments to do the enforcement. But is there a role for the companies themselves in this, do you think?
Look, I think that's why government is so important here, because the companies ultimately only have so much power. And they've tried again to try to enforce this. I mean, you go up to Redmond and ask Microsoft themselves, what any other software or even chip maker. That's why you continue to see a focus in terms of this is the time where right now the U.S. really needs to enforce that and make sure that the goal lines are there and the goalposts for a deal, because this is the time, and that's why there's such sensitivity to it from an IP perspective, as this continues to really be, what I view as a major overhang across the space.
What are the odds, do you think, though, that we'll make progress? I mean, this has been a problem for a long time. The Chinese haven't moved in past negotiations. Why do you think they might now?
Yeah, well, I think now, there's a lot more pressure and put on the Chinese in terms of what you're seeing from the administration. That's where the tariffs right now, they're definitely in a position of strength to kind of, I think, tighten the pressure on China, which has never really been there before in terms of teeth that really had enforcement. That's why we continue to think there's a 60 to 70% chance of that getting done in these tariffs, which in our opinion would be a strong positive for the tech sector. And I can tell you from talking not just to investors, but to executives across the board, this is the number one focus from an IP perspective, especially with 5G and what we saw between Broadcom and Qualcomm and how key that technology is going to be going forward. That's why, in our opinion, the clock has struck 12 here.
All right. Dan, we'll wait and see. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks.